Jason, the jury found Karen Reed not guilty on murder and manslaughter. Was it because they had reasonable doubt or because they thought she was innocent?
So I think for the jurors, there's a mix of some people think that she was definitely innocent, and the other people there was a lot of reasonable doubt, at least to where we didn't want to convict her.
That's really interesting. So, could you give me a breakdown there? Roughly, what percentage of the jury felt she was innocent?
I mean, I can only speak for myself. I think that she was innocent. It's hard to tell exactly what people think deep down. There was a lot of things thrown at us, evidence. So it's hard to tell what truly.
So you say in your head she was innocent. Does that mean you think she was framed by people inside that house?
It doesn't necessarily mean that. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to John. Really, I was only presented a limited scope of what happened at the night, and I could only base my opinion off of the evidence that was shown in the courtroom. So I don't really know if there was a cover up or not. I know that's the big conspiracy around it, but I don't really know. All I know is that they, there was a lot of holes in the investigation.
I
Whether
hear,
they were deliberate holes or not deliberate holes, it's kind of hard from me sitting back to know that, you know, what actually happened.
so what was the feeling of the jury? Because Alan Jackson and the other lawyers raised the issue that she was framed by cops and that they would have turned that house upside down if they really wanted to do an honest investigation, and that he was not hit by a car. He was attacked in that house, bitten by a dog, and then put outside to frame her. Did people on the jury, or some of them, buy that argument?
I think some of them bought that argument. It's just hard to tell though, because whether or not we think that there was malicious intent, we were only presented with the facts that they didn't go into the house. So, there's an example of reasonable doubt. So like there's other examples of reasonable doubt. So even if you want to completely buy into the theory or not, that wasn't what we were tasked with. We were tasked with finding, convicting, or deciding on this person's fate based on the proof and the evidence that the Commonwealth was able to present. And there was a lot of holes in the investigation.
Yet you went many steps beyond that because you say, in your view, she was innocent. What compels you to think that?
Well, one thing that I think that compels me is we did a lot of review of the tapes, and it seemed to me that the videos that we could see from the car after the alleged incident happened, that when we could see the taillight, it was lit up red where it shouldn't just have been red. So that leaves to me a conclusion of, well, how come it's red in this video after the alleged, collision happened, and then it's not, it doesn't have any red pieces where it should be red.
So, in other words, you do not believe that SUV made contact with John O'Keefe.
I don't believe that the SUV collided with John O'Keefe.
What was the initial vote with the jury when you first took your vote?
We didn't do an initial straw poll. The judge recommended to us in the courtroom that is not a good way to do it. We broke down, what we did is we broke down each charge, and we went from top to bottom and discussed everything thoroughly, and did our best to do right by the Karen Reed and the Commonwealth.
Was there a division initially?
Yeah, there was a division. But that's what we're there to deliberate and talk about all the evidence. There was 2 months of us sitting there, them throwing all this information at us absorbing the information, going home, thinking about it, reviewing it in our heads, and we get to the deliberations, and now we have an opportunity to discuss. Some people went into the deliberations and they they were still unsure after two months, and that makes sense because there was a lot of things going on. There's a lot of information. How much can you weigh one thing or another thing over, you know?
Yeah. What about jurors who felt initially she was guilty? Were there any of them?
Yeah, there were a few jurors that think that had thought that initially when they went into the deliberations, that was their standpoint, and that's what we were there to do, to talk through all that and bring up every single piece of evidence. Is there an angle of reasonable doubt to where we're not really sure? Like, are you really sure? Are you 100%, or are you 99.9%? If you're that 99%, we can't convict you.
What brought the ones who felt she was guilty over to the not guilty side? Was there anything in particular that seemed to resonate with them?
It's hard to tell from my position. You'd have to ask them about it. But in my opinion, I think it was just due to the poor investigation. There's just too many holes, and it's hard to prove that the collision happened. So if there's reasonable doubt that happened, or that there may have been foul play, you know, if there's room for that, then it's hard to come to a guilty verdict.
What happened when the jury initially said they had a verdict and then said, oops, no, we don't? And then 15 minutes later, they said, oh, we do. What happened there?
So that actually is kind of interesting. So the envelope, it was sealed, and it's locked away. It'll never be looked at. Um, but on everything on that initial slip was the same as the slip that was presented.
But why did they pull it back?
The pulling the back was for the OUI charge.
The
There was,
driving under the influence, essentially, drunk driving.
yes, driving under the influence. We in our deliberations, we had decided there was enough evidence and proof that she was driving under the influence. And yeah.
So, how did the defense do? How did the lawyers do, in your view? Her lawyers.
For her lawyers specifically, I think they all did. I think that all the lawyers on both sides did a really good job. They presented their case as well.
The police, you say the investigation was poor. The defense said it was more than poor, it was corrupt, and they pointed to the lead detective who had been fired, didn't testify in your trial. Did that have an impact? And did you think it was a corrupt police investigation?
Do I think it was a corrupt police investigation? I don't know. There's no way for me to know. I can't. I wasn't there. There was just there was holes in the case that left for reasonable doubt. I think they could have checked some boxes, or done some things differently. But do I know that they were corrupt? Absolutely not. I don't know that there was any corruption going on. But do I know that there wasn't enough proof or evidence secured by the police to convict Karen Reed? Absolutely not. There was not.
Fair to say that your view was that her SUV did not make contact with O'Keefe, therefore she did not kill him, but you don't know how he died.
I would say that's fair to say. I don't know how John O'Keefe died, and I do not believe that there was a collision between the SUV and John O'Keefe.
Jason, really appreciate the time. I do want to ask one other thing. Did all of the hoopla around the case, the people outside, did it give you comfort in reaching a verdict like this, that you saw there was a community behind your point of view, or was it irrelevant?
Honestly, that made the pressure a lot harder, and it did not give me comfort. It made it a lot harder to block out everything and come to a decision.
Why did it make it harder?
It made it harder because all of the eyes are on us. On we were told we're the most important people in the courtroom, and they keep us away from the crowds of people in the front of the courthouse. But we do see them, and I don't think that having all those people swayed me to go either way. We were only tasked with looking at the evidence. We were 12 jurors. We had to back up how we felt in this for our decision, and we couldn't let any outside factors, her punishment. We couldn't factor any of that. We had to look at the evidence that was presented to us, absorb it, really understand it, and see if there's any reasonable doubt. And there was.
Jason, thank you so much for spending some time and breaking this down. Appreciate it.